Good morning and welcome back to another podcast. We are here and we are joined by Markus from MTech, and he's joining us with the Wulfpack Podcast today. For those of you who don't know, he does all the radios and antennas and from MTech Communications. So let's start right off. Please give me a brief history about yourself. Where are you from? What did you study? And just how you got to here.
Yeah, it's a bit of oddball. So born and raised in Paarl, grew up on a farm just on the outside of town. Paarl Boys High, went to Stellenbosch University. Pretty much how things go in this town. Studied a BSc in geology. It's a bit far off from what I'm doing now. And since about age 17, I had radios as a hobby. My dad had it as a hobby at that age as well. He did some things for their farm up north, and then obviously now growing up here on the farm, we had radios as well. And then I was tinkering around with them, playing around with them, doing the odd speaker replacement, microphone replacement, and then kind of got it as a hobby. And then by about my first year, I was 19, became a registered commercial radio dealer, and then started small scale stuff, farm next door, doing some things here, other farm next door, and then COVID hit, and then suddenly I had a lot of time. University moved online, could do all my classes in 2-3 hours, and then basically between helping on the farm and running my business, basically went through COVID, became an essential service. Did 2 farm watch setups in that time, and that kind of what kicked off my career in the local farming area. Gained a lot of experience through having it as a hobby. I met lots of influential people where I learned a lot. Being an inquisitive human being, I like to read up on things, so I spend lots of evenings reading up on things, talking to people. My dad and my brother are both electrical engineers, so there's a lot of knowledge from that side of life coming into it. Then probably in my beginning of my third year, towards February, that was my first 4x4 event, and that's where I met you. Actually, that was in Klein-Tafelberg, and that was where the journey in the 4x4 industry started off. And 2 years later, we're here.
So you say you were in Paarl Boys?
I was at Paarl Boys High.
Okay, well, this podcast is finished because I was Paarl Gym. And Interschools is next week. Okay, cool. No, I didn't actually know you grew up in Paarl, so that's quite cool. So you grew up from small age, basically, young age.
Yeah. So my parents had the farm in Paarl, we still have it, and born in Stellenbosch, grew up in Paarl, and just moved back from Stellenbosch to Paarl actually. So busy setting up shop in Paarl.
I was going to say, so offices are going to be in Paarl now?
Offices and the workshop will be in Paarl, yeah.
Okay, very cool. Okay, so now let's move on. You kind of answered my next question about how the business idea started and everything. So a general question we have, and you told me this last time, so let me remember this, see if I can remember this. The difference between UHF and VHF. But UHF stands for ultra high frequency and VHF stands for very high frequency. Am I right?
Yes, that is correct.
So it's not as technical as people assume it is. It's quite a basic.
It can get very technical. We can simplify it down very easily. They are radio frequencies governed by spectrum band plans, which are different between organizations and countries. The ITU, which is the International Telecommunications Union, kind of classes things. So you have HF, you have low band, high band, VHF. VHF is split into different things. People have different naming conventions in different industries. The easiest way in the sub-Saharan Africa industry is VHF runs 137 to 174 megahertz. Radios are produced in those bands, so the manufacturers kind of dictate it. So VHF 137 to 174 on most models, and then UHF is 400 to 470, in some cases up to 520 megahertz. The in-between is reserved for military and testing. That's deemed the super bands, kind of a hybrid. We sadly don't have access for that.
SHF?
That super high frequencies above UHF.
Oh, wow.
The middle, the super bands, as it's, or the hidden band, as some people call it, that's got trunking, the old telemetry systems, 230 megs, and then all of your military stuff around about the 260, somewhere around there, which we don't have access to, which is actually a shame.
And which one do we run in South Africa?
In South Africa, VHF and UHF are the most common. There's also mid-band, which runs 66 to 88 megahertz. In the South African 4x4 industry, what this podcast relates to, we run VHF, which is a commercially licensed, it's commercially licensed by ICASA. where the off-road radio industry, or AURA, owns 3 nationwide roaming channels.
Oh, so that's what AURA stands for?
Yeah, the Off-Road Radio Association of South Africa, or Southern Africa, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's actually above, it expands over the borders of South Africa. So you've got basically SADC countries. We've got access to certain channels. And
Australia uses a different one than us, right?
So every day I get the call. I want to run UHF CB. And take a deep breath and explain, right, in Australia, that's UHF territory, they have 80 open UHF channels which are license free for everyone can use, which are heavily governed. We kind of have to backpedal on the question a bit to explain the real differences. I actually spent a lot of time writing this down yesterday. So UHF in this country is most commonly referred to as your little like toy walkie-talkies you buy at your bigger outdoor retail shops,
like outdoor warehouse and stuff like that. The handheld ones,
small,
the non-programmable ones.
Non-programmable, small little handhelds, small little 1 to 16. Those are your global UHF free band channels or license-free channels. They are part of, I believe, the ISM spectrum, which is industrial research, science, and medical band, which is a global like prototyping and testing, and that's where the UHF free band is a global thing. In America, it's called the Public Mobile Radio Service, or the General GMRS, General Mobile Radio Service. It's all kind of the same channels, fall under different tones. So that's UHF free band. You can buy it. It's limited to non-removable antennas in this country. So your antenna, you'll see your antenna can't unscrew with the handheld, and limited to 0.5 watts output power. You can sometimes set tones, so you can do your digital tone-coded squelch, so DCTS and your CTCSS, so your continuous tone-coded squelch, you can set on them with calls and alerts. Just what you give your kids to play with. Some guys use it, just talk to your garden in the garden. That's what it's made for, just to
it's short distance,
allow everyone within 200-300 meters to talk to each other. Yes, you get the companies that claim 20 k's range on the box, and you buy it, and then you get...
But that's the perfect conditions.
That's the absolute perfect condition, mountaintop to mountaintop, holding it here in front. Yes. But that's marketing. And then I get the call, it doesn't work. And yeah, then we have to explain. Majority of UHF in this country is allocated actually to government services. So the police has massive allocations in UHF. They're running a Motorola trunking system. In certain areas they run mid-band, other areas they run VHF. Majority of the metropoles they're running UHF, and now City of Cape Town switched over to Tetra, which runs 800 megs. So we've got lots of allocation which is taken up a government service in UHF. Where in Australia, lots of government allocation was taken by VHF, which comes down to the performance. UHF is great in urban areas. UHF penetrates concrete amazingly. So the higher your frequency, the easier you can penetrate concrete and solid objects. But then that also fizzles out in the open very, very quickly. So
the wave is shorter, but
yeah. So UHF's wavelength is about 70 centimeters, where VHF's around about 2 meters.
Oh wow.
So it's actually a calculation you learned in matric physics, which is a couple of years back for us. Where your Wi-Fi runs at 2.4 gigs, and you have your 5 gig Wi-Fi, for example. You'll notice your 5 gig Wi-Fi works a lot better in buildings, a lot faster and everything, but your 2.4 gig Wi-Fi is the only Wi-Fi you get in the garden.
Interesting.
It runs further. So that's the same principle. So Australia chose VHF for their main government communications, and actually lower than VHF as well for government comms, because they've got vast open plains. Yeah. VHF tends to hug terrain a little bit better and doesn't fizzle out as quickly. So that's why they chose that. South Africa was a little bit late on the ball. They chose UHF metropoles, VHF and open in other areas. Some areas are still running mid-band for that matter. So our VHF here is a lot more open versus their UHF's a lot more open. Just different terrains,
just swapped basically.
Yeah, different use cases. We don't have the general open UHF CB whatever. That's why AURA was envisioned by a couple of radio dealers a way back. And it's a very big milestone in our industry. It was before our time, but it's great. Something else I wanted to touch base on.
A lot of technical terms, and I know not much about radios. So.
Yeah, so technical terms I'll try and talk around. Lots of our older followers, so our parents' age, know the mid-band system or the old Marnet or Burgerband system. It's all the same, 66 to 88 megahertz. That was a government...
It's a CB radio. Or is it after that?
That's also different.
It's different again.
Yeah, it's kind of the same time period. So Marnet was a government-supported, back in the day, part of the commando systems. Afrofirm's taken over parts of it. It performed very well in flat areas like the Free State, up north in the Bushveld, stuff like that. And lots of those systems are still running. We actually still support that system. It's quite a simple system, but it works. So lots of our farmers still have a mid-band radio in their car, and then they have a VHF radio for 4x4 use. And the problem is with mid-band, we don't get equipment. It was very popular, and the reason why it became less popular was antennas are long. So your handheld antennas are about long, and they're heavy and bulky, and that's why VHF took over, and our UHF antennas are a lot shorter as well. It makes things more practical.
So the tech basically didn't advance to keep up with
the tech didn't advance because there was no demand for it. So Motorola started producing equipment. So back in the day when mid-band was popular, we had sanctions in those years, where lots of the equipment was produced locally, were imported boards assembled locally, Philips, Ultron, Motorola, Falcon. They're big units like this, but they work brilliantly for their time. And now when we progress to VHF, or termed as high band, so lots of people talk about high band, it's VHF. In VHF, some manufacturers split it into low split and high split. Low split 136, generally up to 160 something, and then high splits 146 to 170. That's just the chipsets inside. There's not really much else we can talk about. You asked about CB.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So before Aura really took off, there was the whole CB thing. CB, Citizens Band, is also global. It's in the HF spectrum, so in the high frequency spectrum. High frequency spectrum runs from a couple kilohertz up until 30 megahertz. CB is 27 megahertz. So that wavelength is 11 meters.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
It's very long.
Very long. Your conditions govern your conditions dictate how your radio waves handle or perform. So back in the 80s and the 90s, every 4x4 had a massive 3 meter long CB whip on it. And it was great because CB was very easily regulated. You could go to the post office and pay your 40 Rand and you could get your CB license. You had AM sets, you had some sideband sets, 5 watts. It worked, everyone had it. On a good day when your conditions were right, you could skip and talk to America, for example. But we don't have those conditions anymore with whole global warming and sunspots and lithosphere splitting, lithosphere moving.
Oh, wow.
So the lower your frequencies are in the HF spectrum, you what we call skip or bounce. You can bounce radio waves off certain levels of the atmosphere.
Jeez.
So, for example, on 7 megahertz in the amateur spectrum, every morning we can talk to America and Indonesia because we can skip radio waves off the ionosphere or the lithosphere back into another country. So CB worked for that, and then as it became less popular because the equipment wasn't supported, and then our conditions didn't allow it. Performance got worse and worse and worse. Then people went to 29 megahertz. So 29 megahertz used to be the old marine radio. Very, very similar performance. And then that's where Aura kind of started, where they had some licensed marine channels they could use on land, because CB got very congested on land. Because there were only 40 some had 19 channels, some had 40 channel sets, with channel 9 being call an emergency or channel 9 being emergency. You can't really remember. And then the 29 meg marine channels were then commercially licensed inland to use, and then that also fizzled out with performance, and then that's where the switch came further. So it's actually a very, very generational thing. And sometimes you get a picture of an old Navstar 220 or a GME 27 AM set, It's a doorstop these days, but 20 years ago, 40 years ago, it worked like a bomb. Yeah.
So you said the conditions and stuff affect the radio frequencies.
Yes.
And that follows on to my next question is, this is now back to our radios, VHF.
VHF, yes.
Does the power of your unit, the strength of your unit, affect your signal range?
Yes, definitely. So VHF is very interesting. It's all very theoretical, like as any science is, and then the practice throws it all out or proves it. VHF being a 2 meter, plus minus 2 meter length, cloud cover is actually a nice cloudy day like this, you can get excellent performance.
Because it bounces off the clouds.
Bounces off the clouds. That's a thing called tropoducting. I was involved in some testing back in 2018, 2019. We actually set a VHF long-range record from Cape Town to St. Helena Island on VHF simplex. But that's running a couple kilowatts and experimental stuff. And personally, in those days, I was playing from Paarl to Danafontein, Melkbos simplex. I mean, it's a distance on 25 watts. That was
on cloudy days.
On cloudy days, you could hit it. On sunny days, you couldn't. That then falls back to Constantiaberg in Cape Town, that we still had analog TV. So analog TV was actually transmitted on VHF. So there are massive, very big sections of VHF which are still allocated to analog TV, which is obviously being phased out. Their channels were quite wide. The bandwidth of that channel took up a lot of megahertz spectrum. Constantiaberg has a massive transmitter on it. And when the clouds were rolling in from the ocean, people in Ranimund could actually pick up our SABC transmitted from Constantiaberg. That's a phenomenon called tropoducting. So in the Karoo and the tank, when the clouds are low, you're talking.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that comes in output power. The more juice you put behind it, the better it performs. There are legal limits. That's very much in terms of licensing. So ICASA, the Independent Communications Agency of South Africa, regulates that. So most VHF commercial stuff are limited to 25 watts EIRP, that's effected irradiated power at the antenna. So that's including all your cable losses, connector losses, antenna gains. So you can calculate and measure all of that and then adjust radio power down or up depending on what you have. And you can measure irradiated power at the antenna on a calibrated meter. So yes, the more juice you put behind it, the better. But your antenna is everything. So you can have the best radio, the powerful radio, but if you have a inefficient or a bad antenna system, you're not going to get anywhere.
Interesting, because the power has to go through the...
You're losing it, and you end up burning your radio out or damaging your radio. So my first thing is, before you upgrade power, start looking at the radio, disconnect the radio, look at your antenna. Because your antenna is as vital, if not more, than your radio. And everyone always worries about the live. The ground is 90% of the problem.
Yes, I've had that experience myself.
We've had that, yeah.
Yeah, because I've got the shorty antenna, this one, the shorty, and my earth cable came off.
Yeah.
And then I immediately lost signal.
Yeah.
So it wasn't very far. And then as soon as I put it back, I earthed the antenna again.
You had communication.
I had my range back.
So that then, of course, is you're running the shorty on a bracket, on a thing, bolted to the tub, bolted to the chassis. You've got inefficiencies everywhere. That's why we run that earth cable, just to make sure we have a proper earth. Earthing is everything.
So even touching on that now, even on the bumpers and stuff where you mount it, you think because it's mounted to the chassis that it's earth, but the bumper's powder coated.
Often the bumper is double powder coated. Then the bumper is mounted to a winch cradle, mounted to a bracket, mounted to the chassis. Everything's powder coated and or galvanized. So you've got you might have electrical connectivity on the earth, but electrical earth and radio frequency or RF earth are not they are indications of each other. They can be mutually inclusive or exclusive, but grounding is wizardry. There's some electrical engineers which are going to slaughter me, some are going to agree with me. The proof's in the pudding, add a ground that's going to increase performance a lot and just make it reliable. That is the big thing.
So where would you, if the antenna's on the front of the vehicle, where would you ground it to?
So the ground you want as direct, as short as possible. So on the front of the bumper, quite generally we come off the bottom of the screw, we solder on a lug, and your radiator support where your hooter mounts, generally a very good spot on the Land Cruisers and Hiluxes is our main game. So there's a very nice 10 millimeter bolt straight in there where the hooter is. If not, the negative of the battery is right there. And then you've got the absolute best grounding you can. It's just making your grounding more reliable. Stuff rattle off.
Yeah.
We're doing very, very rough conditions with these vehicles every single day of our lives. So we just like to add it to make the communications reliable. Sometimes you have a client phoning in and says, hey, when I'm standing still, everything works, but when I'm driving, it's like in a signal goes, signal comes, signal goes, signal comes, and that's something rattling. It's a loose contact somewhere. So with radios, it's actually not a DC system from the antenna. It actually emits the radio wave at the back of the radio. I'm just going to grab this RTS for demonstration. So you've got of course you have your live and your outer.
Yes.
Your function between these two is 50 ohms. So we're running a 50 ohm VHF stuff, or most RF things are 50 ohms, some 75, some 300, depends on what you're running. Most commercial things are 50 ohms. So your cable diameter, your connector diameter, everything revolves around that 50 ohms. Now, it's actually a waveguide, not a cable. So the easiest analogy to explain it, it's like a water pipe. If your connection isn't right, your connection's leaking, you're losing signal. So your outer is ground. So if you actually measure with the voltmeter and you measure electrical earth, the outer of your RF connector and the chassis of your radio are bonded. That then in turn is bonded to the negative of your power lead. So in an ideal world, you'd want to, when you attach your transceiver or your radio to the vehicle, you want the chassis of the radio screwed in or bolted to the chassis of the vehicle or body of the vehicle. So there's ground point 1.
Interesting.
Ground point 2 would be the power cable directly to the battery, where you pick up lots of interference. That's actually a big thing we have to touch on later as well. You pick up quite a lot of interference via your power lead. Run it directly to the battery, start or aux battery, doesn't matter. Often the aux battery has way less crap going on than the start battery. And then, so that's ground 1 and 2. And then ground 3 is your antenna. You've got your ground connection running as the outer, which is obviously the sleeve or the braiding of your RF cable, which goes to your antenna. That can get damaged, it can get pinched, it can tether off, especially on these roads. So that's why we add the ground at the antenna in case that cable gets damaged or it's too long. You want the shortest possible way forward.
Yeah, I was going to say the length of the cable also affects, because then you've got, the longer it is, the more signal drop you have.
Touching on the power thing, you want to make your antenna as efficient as it can. It's like, you're not going to drive around with ball tires the whole time, are you? You want grip. So you want to get the absolute maximum out of your antenna. A really funny thing people don't know is majority of your signal, we're talking about 3/4 of your signal, is radiated from the bottom third of your antenna. So
that's why if it's in the back of the vehicle,
you struggle,
because it doesn't send the signal forward, it gets blocked by the car's bodywork.
Exactly. So everyone talks about antenna height. Yes, rule is height is might. You want it, but don't measure from the tip. Measure from the base. You want to get your base as high and as clear of obstructions as possible. So taking the MTech antennas now, the way they were developed was not to be mounted somewhere down low on the back of a vehicle. I know there's a chimney running around with on the back at the ladder. It doesn't work. Some guys mount on the back of they mount on the rear bumper at the bottom. You're shielding all the signal going forward. Now vice versa, if you're mounting on the front and you're mounting it,
it's already higher.
It's already higher, but now you're mounting it on a flat bumper down low, your bottom 20% of your aerial are just sending everything straight into the engine block. And yes, you got great signal going forward. You're reflecting a lot of signal off the bonnet forward, but the guys behind you can't hear you. So lots of our tour guides, that's actually very, very specialized client base, are 4x4 tour guides, which have an antenna on the back of their vehicle up high to talk to the group. an antenna up front on a different radio to talk to other guys and hear what's going on. So it all comes down to use case. Where do we put it? Where is it practical? So you have your ideal world, and then where is it practical? Drilling an antenna in the middle of your roof isn't always practical.
And you add extra height to your car.
Exactly. Before we had these antennas, of course, we had our standard whip wire antennas, locally developed, amazing product made by Web Industries, now owned by Yasco. Used to be a state company, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that. But we had to produce our own things when we were sanctioned back in the war. And those antennas are still produced to this day. Design hasn't changed in 35 years. And they get exported internationally. And people around the world are like, whoa, the Zara 130, it's amazing.
And do they work the same as these antennas?
No.
So the lower 3/4 you said?
That part, yes. So there's the Zara range of antennas, they were developed with a specific use case in mind. It's a great antenna in its use case. People moan about performance, but then they're using things outside of the use case. So the Zara range was developed to be drilled into the bodywork of a vehicle, preferably the middle of the roof. Most police vans, you see, middle of the roof, they're running the same style of antenna. It's a ground plane design antenna. So your antenna comes up in the bottom, and the earth, so your braiding of your cable, goes into a brass plate with 4 teeth that grip into your bodywork, and then your live goes up in the wire, and then it relies on a ground plane, which is a plane of metal, generally the roof or the bonnet or a pillar, and it reflects the signal of that. It solely relies on that. They're great, but people mount them on bumpers and they don't work, and then that's why we developed these. So
how do they differ, the MTech ones to the whips?
Yeah, so we'll get to that. So obviously now with mounting locations, actually I can send you a diagram later, where middle of the roof is better, and then on the side you open 2 dB down, and then on the front, on the fender, you also open 2 dB down, but then the moment you mount it on the bumper with art grounding, you actually 4.5 dB down.
Jeez.
Which is a big difference. So 3 dBs is, from sound is a half. That's a big difference. I mean, we moan around about open 7, open 2 dB sometimes. These antennas, yes, for ground is vital. They aren't a groundless antenna. They don't rely on a ground plane. So that's where a very big misconception comes from, that, they don't need a ground. They need a ground reference. Yeah, every antenna does, but they aren't relying on that physical ground plane where it needs metal all around it. They are a collinear design. So they have an internal counterpoise. They still do need that ground reference. I can go into the whole antenna theory, but I'm going to bore people to death. So you get antenna designs, you get J-poles, you get collinears, you get end-feds. It isn't one of those classes. I obviously can't say too much because of patents and trademarks and all the rest. But it's based off a collinear design. Much like on marine applications on boats are fiberglass. You don't have earth.
That's true.
So lots of inspiration from that design antenna, or how the marine VHF antennas are made. So marine radios actually also got over to VHF. So they ditched 29 meg and went to VHF. They're actually in the middle of the commercial spectrum, and it's the same across the world. So yeah, that's where we are. Their use case was designed to work off the front bumper of a vehicle.
The MTech antennas.
MTech antennas, yes. And obviously internal design is completely different to the Australian counterparts, because they're running UHF. They're working with a lot shorter waves. They can stack wavelengths over each other in antenna design. You can actually make antenna and start stacking them, and you get more gain. That's a very big principle we have to talk about as well.
Yeah, because I saw they've got the shorty, and then you literally just screw on top of it. You screw on another piece to make it longer.
Yeah, so that's the thing that was Uniden made that. Didn't quite kick off. So talking about gain, that's measured in dBs. In Australia, your UHF CB is limited to 5 watts of output power, right? So 5 watts on UHF doesn't get you far in the bush. You see these guys go about, we're getting 7 kilometers of range. I get worried when a customer phones me and says, I get 7 kilometers range. Different worlds. They only have 5 watts, so they have to do with that what they can. So in UHF, it's very easy to practically stack a couple of 5/8 wave antennas on top of each other and get your 9 dB, sometimes 12 dB antennas.
Yeah.
So law of energy persists. Radio frequencies or radio waves is energy. You can't make more of it. Yes, you can transfer it into heat and losses and all that, but you can't magically just double it. You can repurpose it and redistribute it. So antennas with gain, obviously, so our MTech long antenna has 2.1 dB gain, which is equivalent to a 5/8 antenna. What we're basically doing is you're taking if you imagine your signal as a ball, you're basically squishing that ball down from the top. So if you take a soccer ball, it's a bit deflated. You squish the top and the bottom. You're actually forming a donut or a bagel shape, and you're pushing more of that signal out in that flat plane. So antenna design comes to use case. Now, if we wanted to make a 3 something meter long antenna, we could stack 2 of these above each other. No problem. But the 3 meter long antenna is not practical. Yes, then we could push even more signal out flatter, but then you lose top and bottom signal. Yes, and it's not practical. We have base station antennas, which are made for houses and repeater towers and stuff, and radio amateurs, which go up into the 7 dB on VHF, which are omnidirectional, which means they put signal out in a circular fashion. Then you can get directional antennas like Yagis, where you can direct signal in a beam. So in Australia, they stack with the wavelengths being shorter, and the antennas are shorter. So their 3 dB UHF is shorter than our shorty.
Wow.
Yeah. So they can run a 2 meter long antenna and have 9 dB, but they've only got 5 watts. We're pushing 25 watts. So with the performance increase or the performance difference of VHF to UHF, we are miles ahead. With the output power, we're miles ahead. And then obviously, if we add 2.1 dB or 3 dBi, whatever you want to call it, theoretically to it, we're miles ahead of them. And Australian customers have contacted me, but we can't export.
Because it's
legalities, yeah.
And they've got a different frequency, so it won't work there.
It won't work. So we've got vice versa. We've got clients that couldn't get stock by us because we were sold out. They brought GME units in, plug the VHF radio into a UHF antenna. Doesn't work, burn the radio out, try to claim warranty, and we're like, soz dude, I'll help you. I think that pretty much explains that. The first comeback question, output power. That was the where we actually
started this conversation.
Yes, it helps.
Okay.
But if you want, make sure your antenna is perfect before you start turning up the power.
And what is the difference? It'll fall into our next segment now, which is kind of a new segment I want to add to this podcast called Show and Tell.
Yes.
So we've got some of your products here. So you've got some radios here. So you've got the Mini, which is the small radio.
Yes, the RTS Mini, yes.
This is the smallest power output one, correct?
Which on the built-in, yes.
Built-in.
Yes, that is a 20 watt output.
And the biggest one you have, it maxes out at 25 watts?
So our mainframe, so your radio sizes are governed by your DIN standards. So they're all the same size. You see, they all fit. They're all roughly the same size. Some a bit wider, some a bit less. They are all typically 25 watts. They can be adjusted a little bit up, a little bit down. That you can get to effective radiated power to where it needs to
after
be
the losses.
After losses and everything. There are, in very special cases, high power radios allowed, or higher output radios, which are special import from importers. Icon brings in a couple. Kenwood brings in a range.
Probably for emergency services.
Yes, that government services, and quite often you can't run a 35 watt or a 50 watt VHF set. You don't, if you don't need it, don't run it. Quite often 5 watts is enough, depending on what you're doing. If you're running a massive game park on the border and you're applying for the license and you say, hey, listen, we're running 60 vehicles, but we're covering a massive area, we need that extra range. You want that extra 3 dB signal, then they will quite often give you that allowance for 35 watt effective radiated power. In very special cases, even higher, but that's a very big legislative gap, or not gap, hurdle you have to overcome. So they are available, but legalities are quite strong, and the CASA is very strict these days. Dealers get inspected. We have dealer registers. We have to every change to a radio, everything has to be documented and kept on file. So that's the thing, licensing somewhere.
We'll get to the licensing now. Yes,
but yes, it is available. 25 watts is more than enough. 35, awesome if you can do it. But come back to the Mini. The Mini is 20 watts output power. Your difference between 20 watts and 25 watts is negligible. If you're doubling it, yes, you're going to see a difference. But quite often, the difference between 20 and 25, you will not notice.
And then also in your product range, you've got the sat phone over there.
Yes.
So explain to me how the sat phone works to a normal phone versus the radios, just what it is and how it works.
Use cases. So I think we should start off with the handheld VHF sets maybe. Okay, cool. So you have your built-in radios, which are built into your vehicle. They are reliable 20-25 kilometers communications reliably and way more possible depending on conditions and antennas and everything. Handheld radios are not meant to be used from inside the vehicle because of course you're shielding all of your radiation. They're only 5 watts. Okay, cool. The Aussies can only run open 5, so sorry guys. From inside the vehicle, you're shielding them. They're meant to be given to a spotter, given to a marshal, speak to the vehicle.
Close distance, close
to medium distance. Line of sight. If you can see the other vehicle, on 2-3 kilometers, you can talk to them from inside the vehicle to inside the vehicle. Depends on how much crap's in their car, which blocks the signal. Quite often, if the car's the rear is facing you, you can't hear them, but the moment they turn, you can hear them again. That is where built-ins come in. Now, sat phones. I'll just grab it here quickly. They're amazing. I love them to bits. Very big advocate of them. They are expensive, but
it's also not something you use daily.
No, well, most people. It depends. Comes down to priorities. We see people building a vehicle and focusing more on the looks and spending tens of thousands of rands at import shops, putting on Tupperware body kits, and then but 2,000-3,000 rand in a radio is too much when I have to talk to my buddies and you bother everyone on the trip. It's a very big safety thing. Sat phone for me personally, for many business owners, it's a tool for business. For everyone else, it's an emergency communications tool. These actually came off rental now. We rent them out. People, you can't buy them. They're in the area of 20,000 rand to purchase, and then plus your SIM card and your airtime. Your
airtime's expensive because
it's depending on what you're running, between $1 and $2 per minute.
Jeez.
Yeah, and that's sending and receiving. So if you receive a call, the time also runs. How they work, as long as you can see the sky, you're talking. I'm a very big advocate of the Inmarsat range. I'm not going to talk about the flaws of other systems. Don't want to get legal battle. The reason why I love Inmarsat is because they have geostationary satellites. I think satellite 3 is, don't quote me, I think they have 4 geostationary satellites. One of them has Africa, a bit of Europe, and a bit of Eurasia, a little bit covered, the Arab states and stuff. As long as you can see the sky, fold your antenna up, put it up, search a satellite, get signal, punch in your number, and you'll be amazed by the quality of the call. It sounds way better than your local carriers.
Crazy.
Yeah, you have a bit of latency on it, obviously, because it's going phone to satellite to downhole, and then to someone's cell phone or landline, but the voice quality is amazing. These phones have a tracking feature. Hit the tracking button, you can set your tracking interval from a couple minutes, couple seconds to every hour, every day. Uploads on a portal, sends emails, sends SMSs. You can even tweet from this thing.
Really?
Yeah, you can. You can actually tweet your location. This the sat phone was released in the 2010s, somewhere around there. Wow. That's pretty much the most modern unit out there currently. It's a bomb-proof design. Make sure don't hit this button. It's got your same panic button on the top, as, for example, your Garmin InReach system and your iSpot X devices. If you hit that panic button on top, panic signal goes to the Global Rescue Coordination Center, and they will phone you. And if you can't,
if you don't answer,
if you don't answer, they assume the worst. Now this comes to why I advocate for these. If you take a satellite messaging device and you hit the panic button, some of them don't even have a talk back option. So you hit the panic button, yes, you can hit it and you can cancel. So you can activate it and you can cancel it. No one knows, have you broken your ankle? As someone bitten by a snake? Do you just need a new CV? Do you need a new drive shaft? You don't know how bad it is.
Yeah.
So let's say you take Sat Messenger, hit the panic, goes to the Global Rescue Coordination Center. They see where you are based on location, and they get the appropriate services out to you in your local area. Those services don't know what they're responding to, so they are prepared for everything, which would be medical most of the time. They won't bring you a can of fuel, but they can assist you. They can then call back and assist you with that. Where with some communicators have a two-way communication, so you can sit and type, or with Bluetooth from your phone, type back. Some other devices have a absolute emergency, and some have an assistance button, which was quite handy. These, they can phone you. You can talk to them. Very important to be able to talk to someone, and then establish what's wrong, send the right services out. Also, if you're in the bush for 3 weeks, you maybe want to call your wife, or call home, or call someone and hear someone's voice. Stuff gets lonely. For me, it's very important. I hate messaging. I like to grab a phone and call. And your subscriptions are pretty much the same. Your 200 odd rand for your tracking and emergency subscription per month. And then, of course, SMSs are, I think, 8 rand or 11 rand SMS. Versus if you take your other satellite messenger subscriptions, yes, your phones or your device is a little bit cheaper, but you've got your higher running costs and you're limited to 5 messages.
Oh, wow.
Where here, you load your airtime, it's valid for a year. So with us, we purchase airtime through us, it's valid for a year. Our rental model and our purchase model is very different to other satellite providers out there. That's why we are becoming very popular on the satellite side of life. Burn rates between $1 and $2 a minute, or part thereof. That's caught me out. So quite often I drop the call on 59 seconds or on 2:59. If you drop it on 2 minutes and 2 seconds, you lose the whole unit.
Oh, jeez.
So a little bit mindful. Its alarm is great. I sleep through alarms, so this thing is amazing. Battery life's amazing, and we love them. Rental depends how long the rental period is. Roughly between 80 and 120 rand a day. And then airtime, we load airtime on them, and then we bill you for the airtime after the fact. Subtract the airtime from the deposit. With other rental agencies, you're paying roughly the same or a bit more, but then you have to buy your own airtime, which expires after you come back. So most people buy 5 minutes or half an hour of the airtime, and it expires, and they lose that money. Where we bill you per minute after the fact. That's why we are becoming more popular. And
what's the range of them? Global or global?
So the SIM cards we run in these are only for the satellite that covers Africa.
Okay, gotcha.
That airtime's a bit cheaper, and the SIM card's a bit cheaper.
Because less of an area it covers.
Less of an area to cover. You can buy SIM cards for them. So the carrier is Inmarsat. So I should take it out and show you. It's a standard SIM card, as your normal phone takes. You can't put your normal SA carrier SIM. I've had that question before. You can get SIM cards that are activated globally, and you can travel this thing wherever. Drawback to Inmarsat is that it doesn't cover the poles. So with the geostationary satellites, they cover the globe like this. They don't have top and bottom. I doubt you and I will ever go to the poles.
Well, I want to go there.
Yeah, we want to, but if we go there, if you're spending that money, you might as well take a different unit with. Where Iridium has non-stationary satellites which move on orbits, and if those satellites drop out, you have a 20 to 40 minute gap in signal, which on a normal handheld device you can't see if you have signal or not. You press your panic doesn't go through. That's why Inmarsat, please don't sue me. Yeah, so Iridium works on the poles, where
Interesting.
Inmarsat doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as long as you can see the sky, it works. You get very nice accessories. So they have an external antenna port on the back, and as you know, I love antennas. So we are developing a external vehicle kit where this can be in a cradle inside the vehicle with an antenna on your roof rack or on the front. It's got Bluetooth, so I link it to my headset in the car. So I flip the antenna up, leave it on the dashboard, and it's on my hands-free if I do need that.
Yeah.
Bluetooth earphones work with it. And then you get a landline. It's like a landline phone. You can put antenna on your house even, because inside a house it doesn't work unless you're standing at the window. Yeah.
Crazy. That's so cool. Such a crazy tech.
Yeah, people. It's very specialized.
Yeah.
It's been around for ages. People don't believe me. Like lots of the influencers we work with, don't believe me and say, "Hey, take it to the weekend," and then they're like, "Damn." Yes, I've given them away for weekends, and then we won't mention names here, but drunk calls at 1 a.m. showing it off at the campfire.
And
that happens.
A very expensive call.
Very expensive call to wake me up. Yes, I immediately think it's an emergency. You don't call the sat phone, but hey, it was funny, and it actually resulted in a couple sales of the phone. So thanks.
Nice.
And it's exposure. Yes.
While we're on the sat phone thing, you can put it down.
Okay, cool.
Let's move on to the next object of yours, which is the signal booster.
Yes, the second or one of the Blackmagic products we have as well.
So, can you explain to me how the signal booster works?
And we'll then just dig it out.
Must I reach it?
Yeah, let's reach that. Right.
Do you need the antenna as well?
But later. So Here we go. Lovely unit. This is the outdated unit from WeBoost. So WeBoost in America, it's an American brand, is extremely strong in America, and their overlanding presence in America is huge. Obviously, America's cell phone bans, or their frequency locations for cell phones are very different to ours here. So our boosters here differ from American boosters. Some guys import an American booster from Amazon and it doesn't work here. That's why we have the locally sold ones. This is a WeBoost product. It's called the AM100 Pro. I love them to bits. Some guys don't. Most of the heartache comes from setup. Very big thing on these is how they're set up, how they are positioned, how you use it.
And what do they do exactly before you go too far?
Okay, they make your cell phone signal more reliable. So it amplifies it, it boosts it.
So, but you have to have signal.
You have to have signal, yes. So the biggest analogy you always use is it's like a pressure pump for water. You have to have some water to be able to pump to increase the pressure on it. It has to see some form of signal on the outside antenna to be able to amplify it by 32 times.
Jeez.
Yeah, so we can, in dB terms, that's 50 odd or whatever it is. Some models up to 92 dB, which is a lot. And then you have, of course, have inside antenna where it then irradiates that power on the inside of your vehicle. Now, like the water pump model we had, you can't pump the water back into the same dam. You aren't going to get anywhere. So setup, especially in a vehicle, is very difficult. You want to have your receive antenna or your outside antenna, what we deem the RX antenna. Over here. This is actually being discontinued. Soon we have some big plans getting those. Yeah, so this is our revision 3 of the RX antenna. This is actually a 12 dB receive antenna, where your standard antenna delivered with it is a 0 dB.
Oh, so this is the standard one comes with, and this is the MTech one.
Yeah, so the booster is great, the antennas sold with it aren't that great, so we believe in optimizing. So we optimize the antennas around the product, which makes them perform better. A lot more receive sensitive, so it's more sensitive to incoming signals. That then we use a lot better cable. So the cable to this would be a LMR195 cable, which is a 5mm cable versus a 2.5mm RG cable. So we have way less cable losses on our receive. Obviously, if you have massive cable losses on your receive side, you're getting less signal into the booster. Booster amplifies it. You want to split them vertically by about 2 or 3 wavelengths. So we say try to split them vertically by a meter.
What does that mean?
So you want to have your antenna above your booster. If you put everything next to each other, it's going to loop. So then your receive antenna is going to receive what your transmit antenna is transmitting. Booster drops down the power, doesn't work. Majority of my service calls on these is set up. The phone call fixes it, saying, hey, move them around. I generally mount the receive antenna wherever it's practical. and then the rest where it works. Quite often on the roof rack, back of the vehicle, up high, on the bumper, the booster, passenger footwell, under the seat, down low, away, you're shielded from the receive antenna. Transmit antenna, we run to where the phone's going to be used. These units can support about 5 to 6 devices before they start to get slow. It is a scaled down device from one of the home units. You never have more than 5 cell phones in the car.
Yeah.
So it's you want to put the transmit antenna as close to your phone as possible. So mine's at my phone holder. I run one in my personal vehicle every day of the week because in load shedding.
The signal goes.
You get home units, which are very popular on game farms, a little bit bigger, a lot more powerful, and then we run massive Alamar 400, Alamar 600, half-inch high flex, which is very, very good cable for that receive signal. Directional receive antenna, and then we have multiple antennas on the inside of the house to provide signal inside the house.
So, does it send the signal as well as received? It's two-way.
Yes.
It does not just receive. It can boost your sending signal as well.
Yeah. So it's from what's going from your phone out also goes through the unit. It can't create signal.
Yeah.
That's a very important thing. When you want to create signal, sat phone. So that is your major difference.
And with your antenna, can you mount this on the front bumper, or has it to be higher than like an?
Preferably higher.
Okay.
Many people mount on the front bumper, but then you've got to mount the unit, the
very
booster,
low,
very low and far away. Double cabs are easier. Single cabs are a pain in the ass because then you've got looping very, very quickly. Sometimes we even put this in the canopy at the back to just shield it, or we put the receive antenna at the back of the canopy to try and just.
So it's very technical.
Very technical and very, very, very labor consuming to get it right. Yes.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to some Instagram questions quickly.
Yes.
You kind of touched on this one already, but just give me a brief, like a one sentence again, or let me ask you this. Uber Africa asks, that's my dad, what is the range difference with the shorty and the long antenna? So what's the kilometer range difference between the shorty and the long one?
People are going to butcher me, but it depends on environment. Theoretically, you got a quarter wave versus a 5/8 collinear. Theoretically, it's roughly half, but
depends on conditions.
It depends on conditions. I can tell you right now, in 90% of the cases, you won't see a difference. Your long antenna, of course, donut-shaped signal. Quarter wave as round signal. Still a sphere. If you're doing lots of mountain passes, stuff like that, take the shorty.
Yeah, because the shorty is better over high mountainous areas, and the long one is better over flat areas.
Especially in dune environments as well, when you're going up and down dunes. If your vehicle's on an angle, your antenna's also on an angle, so that donut pushes up into the sky. If there's a guy on the other side of the mountain pass also pushing up in the sky, you might lose each other. The comms are very bad. Where quarter wave, you are covering that signal
because it's a round bubble.
It's a round bubble, so you're actually covering that dead zone. So pros and cons. Many guys run both. Effective range difference on the shorty generally gets reports 20-25 k's and above, 35 often. Haven't really broken that 50k in the shorty yet. Where on the long one we do generally hit that 50k a lot. And then with a bit of juice behind the 50, we've hit 100 kilometers.
Jeez.
But that depends on your radio license again, because your radio license also has a radius limit to it. So some radio licenses are postcode limited or 200 kilometer radius limited. We have a roaming license, which means we can, from your vehicle, you have a radius of licensed 60 kilometers. I believe that is.
So while you're on the topic of licensing,
yes.
The next question actually covers that as well,
yes.
And I left it for this question. 4x4 Adventures with Peels asks, please discuss licensing, how to apply, where to apply, and why is it necessary to have on the radio? So just go through the whole licensing.
So I'm going to start with why is it necessary. Lots of people hear license and they swear at you, and they say, no, don't want another license. I'm like, you pay the license for your vehicle. Your vehicle's licensed, you are licensed. Same with firearms. Firearms licensed, you are licensed. Radios, the Radio Control Act is actually very similar to the Firearms Control Act. If you replace some words, it's remarkably similar. You, in most applications, you as the operator need to be licensed, and the equipment needs to be licensed, and the system needs to be licensed. That dumps down to that. For For VHF commercial, UHF commercial stuff, you as the operator don't have to be licensed. The system has to be licensed.
Got it.
So the Aura system is licensed with ICASA. So the Off-Road Radio Association has those channels allocated by ICASA, and then they are allowed to sublet. So then they sublet through authorized clubs, radio dealers, agencies, forums. The licensing is necessary for control. Radios are licensed as well. So in the back of each radio, there's a ICASA sticker that's with a TA number. That's a type approval number. You can see that down there.
Interesting, yeah.
So this is a TA 2017, and then with the application number behind it, means this unit was type approved in 2017, or the revision was type approved in 2017, which means the radio was imported. It was submitted by a legal radio dealer to ICASA for testing. It is compliant with all our regulations. This is like a roadworthy for your vehicle. If Toyota wants to import a new vehicle, it's got to go through inspection. Is it compliant with our laws? That's why illegal radios I wanted to touch on as well. There are heaps of illegal radios flooding the market, and it's a daily ache for us to sort the problems out which they cause with interference, unlicensed users on channels just going on about it. It's a big problem. You need regulation in life. So yes, for us with Aura, it's very simple. We save us the heartache dealing with the ICASA. You have to have patience dealing with the ICASA, like any government agency. Aura does that for us. And then the easiest way for anyone which wants to have a radio, through the 4x4 community forum. To make your account is free, so that's your club membership done. And then there's a link, you fill in half a page of admin, you pay I think it's 250 Rand, a little bit less than 250, and that allows you to, on your license to your ID number, have 5 radios on Aura's system.
So it actually links to your ID number?
Yeah, it links back to your ID number, yeah. Quite often you have to give the serial numbers of your radios, similar to firearms. You go to radio dealer, so you come to me, you want radio, I say great, cool, we talk, you decide an RTS mini and a shorty. I book stock out for you on a pro forma invoice. I give you the serial number of the radio. You apply that serial number to, if you're doing it through Land Cruiser Club, they very much want the serial number for community, I believe, as well. And then you apply, we have your radio serial number, then you come back to me, 2 pieces of paper, you've got your Aura license. Generally takes 3 days. Then you can even pay for the stock so long, and then you can just wait in the office until you present your license. I keep a copy of the license with a copy of your ID number, or copy of your ID with your invoice. So on your invoice is obviously the serial number of the radio and your ID number and the license number. So those 3 documents come into a file, and then we have a dealer register, which is basically a massive spreadsheet or a book. You go to a firearm store, the massive book you fill in, have one of those as well, where all the information is filled in. You own this ID number, this address owns this radio with these channels on this license number to this date. That's all needed. It is regulation and does get inspected. Police officers have the right to ask for your radio license, especially cross-border. That's a very big thing, cross-border, yeah. I think that covers it.
Okay, asked how to apply, where to apply,
and why is it necessary.
Yeah.
Cool.
Got it. Okay,
don't buy illegal radios, please.
Illegal radios.
Don't buy illegal ones. Buy from registered dealers. Make sure it's type approved. The difference is not just, yes, there's a big price difference, but you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Next is NetPret. The E's are 3s, which are very cool.
Yes, Quibus.
What is the tested range for those aerials? Okay, we did cover that. Why should I buy one? My farmer aerial works just well as a fancy aerial. There is no range increase in these, but it looks cool, so I bought one. So you bought one anyway.
You bought one anyways. Yeah. So it very much depends. Yes, you can't. People want to put. You can't. You sell products as range, obviously, but you can't put a finger down on range. Your big thing comes.
It's a lot of variables.
Lots of our kits go out on self-installation, on DIY kits. So we've made the process as easy as we possibly can. Our biggest problem is connectors at the back of the antennas. Our first 2 containers were sold with an unterminated connector, and we had a video where we showed you how to put the connector on. It's not rocket science. Not everyone's a rocket scientist, but it turns out not everyone can solder. So now they come pre-terminated. So you just push it through your firewall, put your connector back on, and we've eliminated that technicality. In Quibus's case, I know you travel solo quite a lot. You'd have to talk to someone. Very much can be that his farm works, talking about probably his RS60 or his R130, was most likely working in an ideal use case, probably in the C-pillar or on the fender of his Land Cruiser. And he's gone to, I think, a long antenna with a RTS 2135, one of these, I think. If he's getting the same range, there's something wrong. So we definitely have to look at that. If you're getting the same range, you know it's working. If you're getting less than a kilometer, hey, we know there's something not working. So if you're getting 200-300 meters, the antenna isn't working.
Could be the earth case again.
Could be the classic earth case. Could be antenna cables rattled off. Quite often we have to Loctite the PL2F9 connector at the back, which connects your radio. That can rattle off.
This back one?
That back one.
It actually happened to me the other day.
Yeah.
I was busy fiddling in the car and I was like, oh, why is this loose? And it was completely loose, so I had to re-screw it back in.
Yeah, re-screw it back in. Sometimes we add some tape, drop a super glue on top, whatever it does for you. Quite often some of our customers run the tilt bracket. Tilt bracket, once again, 2 powder-coated stainless steel surfaces bolted to a powder-coated surface, bolted to the chassis, run an external earth, please. So that falls back to the earth. Getting the same range, yes, it's working. Definitely contact us and we can make sure that we're getting the optimum out of that system.
Okay, next question by Sexy Sadie 110. Are they locally manufactured antennas?
Cool, so let's touch on that. Design, local. Idea, local. Prototyping is local. If anyone in the manufacturing industry will tell you to manufacture anything electronic in this country is hellishly expensive.
Everything's imported, like the products are imported anyway.
Everything's imported. Everything on this table everything on this table is actually imported. It's a lot cheaper to manufacture in Asia. So our main production runs are at a specific factory in Asia. We have an agreement with our blueprints, which produce to our spec with very, very high quality control standards. Yeah.
Cool. So, was it locally prototypes, but designed there and then brought it back in again? Okay. Camp Explore SAs asks how to get sponsored.
Send us email. So send us a DM, send us email. If you send us a DM, I'll tell you to send me email. If anyone wants to get sponsored, I think you did it as well. Send us a pitch. So send us a 1 to 2 page document. Who you are, what you do, where you're from. Very important. What's your audience? What's your reach?
What you can supply.
What you can give back. Everyone always wants 10, 20,000 of free equipment. Cool. What can you give me? What is my return on investment from my company side? Return on investment, you can't predict it, you can't judge it, but there's a very good indicators like engagement, following. You'll be able to maybe elaborate on that.
Basically it's a trade-off. You can't just get product for free. You've got to give it back. A trade. There's some value which you must be able to offer
the company to effectively, quote unquote, pay it back.
Yes.
Provide content, provide exposure to the value of that product. Yes.
Yeah. The email address will be on your website. I'll link it in the description below.
On social media, it's in my WhatsApp.
Then last question, Four-Wheeling ZA ask, is there an emergency channel which to call for help if you don't have a sat phone, so on the built-in radios?
On the radios, yes.
Or must you purely rely on just by chance being in range of someone?
Yeah, so a two-way radio, yes, it's a very big safety thing if you're traveling in a group. To let, hey, listen, I'm the last guy in the group, I'm after the breakdown or this guy's rolled or whatever, yes. If you are solo traveling, don't rely on VHF. On Aura, most people chill on Aura 1 the whole time. That is your call channel. Call there for help first. You never know who's in range. On massive holiday weekends and holiday seasons, within 50 kilometers, you will generally have someone. Obviously, it depends if their radio system works well. If you're solo traveling, take a sat phone. You can rent them. But I would not solely rely on VHF, but if you need it, channel 1.
The chance of finding someone is...
Chance of finding someone, it is there, but it's not great. If you're traveling in a group, that's perfect. If you're solo traveling, do not rely on it. Generally, if you're solo traveling, leave the radio on scan, goes through all the channels programmed into it, and if it hears, then you can hear. Yeah.
Okay, let's round off this podcast with my final question. Are there any products you can tell us which is coming in the future which don't have NDAs on?
So we have to, of course, be very mindful of the competition. We have to keep them guessing. Yes, there are products. As I said, we are discontinuing our GSM antenna. We are developing something new. There are lots of things in the pipeline, upgrades to the VHF stuff. every container we're bringing in is upgraded. We're constantly busy on R&D, making the product as good as it possibly can. We've gone through lots of changes of internal shock absorbers, on springs, on coils, on capacitors, on whatever, even on fiberglass, even on the coating on the fiberglass. We've gone from a beginning was a 0.9 mil fiberglass, we had a 2.5 mil fiberglass.
Jeez.
You can't break these. There's one that's broken in this country, and that was because a kudu broke it.
Oh wow!
So yeah,
a kudu goes through a car.
Exactly. So we try and make the product as best we can. Development's always happening on new brackets, mounting solutions, new cars always coming out. So we're busy with Blue Ocean Customs in Malmesbury, busy on developing brackets which come off the bonnet hinges for your popular vehicles. Toyota Fortuner, Hilux, Prado, Land Cruiser series vehicles, the new Ford Ranger. Bodywork on vehicles gets a lot thinner, so we can't really always rely on bodywork mounting. Also a reason why we developed these. Instance, the GD6 bodywork's less than half the thickness of the D4D's bodywork. Wow. So if you drill in a Zara 130 into a GD6 and you scrape a branch, it opens that bodywork up like a tuna can. That's why also a reason we went for development on these. GSM, there's lots of stuff happening in the GSM space development. Lots of sat phone development happening, not with us but with Inmarsat. Will not indulge further on that. GSM, that is in-house on the radio side. We're working with critical partners, figuring out what we want to do, and then relationships with other companies. How can we develop products together to give the end users? Yeah.
So lots of development happening.
Lots of developments happening. Lots of my time. Lots of money goes into development. On the 12 volt side of life, 12 volts obviously ties in with all radio things. There is dev happening on the 12 volt range. Obviously, we're a very big dealer for Victron. Victron Energy products, they're two lying on the table. They're DC stuff, but we are very much in touch with them locally on certain products we want to adjust for the 4x4 market to market them better inside the 4x4 market. Some stuff happening on the lithium battery front, but can't do that. We've got lots of pieces of wood in the fire, trying to make things work and trying to grow.
Nice.
Have to go forward, yeah.
Cool. But yeah, thank you for that podcast. I think it was very educational and interesting. Like I said, I don't know much about these radios, so I learned a lot today about the WeBoost, the signal boosters, the antennas, the radios, everything basically. So yeah, very educational for the audience. If there's anyone that has questions, drop them in the comments below. I'll forward them to Markus to answer those questions. And then if there are a lot of questions, we'll do a part 2.
Yes, and we are planning from the MTech side to start a YouTube channel, and also on the Reels side, post technical Reels focusing, it's a 1 minute reel about the cell phone booster. We're going to start doing that. We're in the process of building a workshop and a new shop and everything. So a lot of things happening. Very excited to have our own 30 square meter place for development alone. And then from there onwards, we're going to try and push as much informative content out there to assist with sales. Lots of the phone calls I get every day are very much the same. So we're going to try and cover that with content to answer those questions before they happen, and then obviously make it easier decision process for the customer, easier sales process on the website. They don't have to phone me, wait for me to issue a quote. They've been informed on social media. They can maybe phone me and ask 2-3 key questions, but most things are answered already. So that's what we are planning to do. Cool.
So yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for listening, and then I'll link Markus's and MTech stuff in the description below.
Yes, please, yeah.
And then thank you.
Cool.
And good luck with your developments and future business.
Thank you very much. I'll see you around.
Cool.
Thank you.